Hello, Dexter Morgan fans, and welcome to the Dexter New Blood Wrap-Up Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Reynolds, writer and producer of Showtime original series, Dexter, and now the new Showtime Special Event Series, Dexter New Blood. But first things first, for those listeners who don't have Showtime yet, visit show.com/DexterPod for a special limited time offer. You get to try Showtime free for 30 days and then just $3.99 a month for your first 4 months. Once again, it's show.com/DexterPod. This offer is for new customers only and expires November 30th, 2021. So get on that if you want to see what we're talking about. And you definitely want to make sure you have Showtime because today is a very exciting day as we're discussing the premiere episode of Dexter New Blood. It's official. Dexter's back. And we're going to dive into it, where he is, what he's doing, and who he is now. So joining me to break down the first episode of New Blood is the man everyone has been waiting to see again, Dexter Morgan himself, Michael C. Hall, multiple Emmy-nominated star and executive producer of Dexter New Blood. And later we're going to talk to Clyde Phillips, Dexter showrunner, executive producer of Dexter New Blood, and writer of this episode, and discuss how it all came together. So let's get into it. Michael, thanks for coming on.
Sure.
Yeah, the premiere. How was that?
It was amazing. Showtime did this amazing thing and invited a bunch of fans of the show to sit in the front section of the theater. So we were watching a premiere, not just a bunch of actors and their friends and corporate suits, but actual genuine fans of the show. It was really fun to hear their enthusiasm and audible gasps and cheers and other reactions. And it's just not an experience that you can quite have watching it on the small screen at home. So it was really gratifying to feel like we were on to something that people who know and love the show were instinctually responding to.
Yeah, it's fun when you think you know how people are going to respond. But the one that I was caught off guard by was when Dexter starts putting together his kill room. And that sort of crescendo.
Yeah.
Like anticipation. He's back. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. Such an appetite for him to get back to work. It was pretty wild. It was really exciting and also kind of jarring.
New Blood is a bit of a departure from the Dexter we knew, right? He's clearly started over. He has a new name, a new persona, and is living this, normal, in quotes, low-key life. So you want to talk about how you sort of approached playing this new but still familiar character?
Yeah, a lot of it was so totally informed by the environment, just being in this completely, turned inside out world that was cold instead of hot and was a small town instead of a metropolis, and it goes on and on. I think there was a stage direction in an early version of a script from a scene that maybe wasn't even quite there anymore, but it just suggested that Dexter was communicating with somebody in the store, helping them in a way that revealed that he was one of these people. And when I talked about what Dexter's look would be like with Marcos, he said, he should look like an old shoe. He's just an inconspicuous part of the fabric of this world instead of the world we used to see him in, and he's blended in. And I think, obviously, the biggest change is that he hasn't killed anybody in 8 years. He's kind of acknowledged that he doesn't deserve that privilege anymore. I think the fact that he's made that decision reveals a lot about his humanity. It suggests that he does, in fact, possess some,
Yeah.
If he didn't, he would have just left town and continued to kill without any remorse or any sense of responsibility for the collateral damage that he has created. He used to be a guy who had this really authentic, monstrous side that he indulged, and this really inauthentic but very believable presentation that he showed the world. And the lines between those two continually blurred as the show moved forward.
Yeah.
So much so that it's hard to know where the monster begins and where the supposedly fake person ends. And I think he's buried the monster now. And all he is this new simulation. And this new simulation is, ironically, the most earnest attempt he's ever made at being authentic. But of course, if the monster does emerge, which it does,
They know.
chaos, a chaos that's sort of a different flavor is going to ensue internally, I think, for the character.
Dexter's superpower is sort of to be able to blend in. And he believes the lie and knows it's a lie. And, but like you say, it's never been more real, I guess, than it is in this small town.
Yeah, he's sort of like come to terms with, I don't think he thinks he's as unique as he maybe once thought he was. I mean, all of us, and I think he maybe has come to recognize this, tell ourselves a story and present some face of that story to the world. We're all playing at authenticity and playing roles in different situations. And I think he's a little less preoccupied with his being a man apart, I think.
Yeah. He's not quite a stepdad, but he's kind of a stepdad. And then he's got this relationship with Angela, which again, throughout it, we were always sort of like, when we were talking about Dexter in the room, we talked about how he has this very, he wants to control his universe, right?
Right.
And so he has to get in the police station a little bit. He has to be surrounded by weapons a little bit. He has to have just those little touchstones that seem normal, but when you know his past, it is wild that he's dating the chief of police.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to think about, when he's home alone, is he sort of bemused with the fact that he's chosen or finds himself in a relationship with the chief of police? Is that something that he sought out consciously? Is it something that, he couldn't have, is obviously a part of what drew him to her. But is he dating her in spite of that, because of that? And, as is so often the answer to questions that are either or, in the case of Dexter, it's probably both.
Yeah, for sure. Deb's death, right, was the biggest moment, I feel, in Dexter's life. Had a huge impact on him. So what was it like to play against Deb as Dexter's conscience as opposed to the sister, like an actual other human being? Because it's even different than the way Harry was played, Yeah,
very different. I think the difference has to do with the fact that they're different characters, but I think the difference also has a great deal to do with the fact that he's a different character and is much more, at least potentially, at odds with himself. I think when we first see them, I think we're seeing what the relationship has been, one that's serene and comforting and domestic and gives some sort of like companionship and has a level of ease to it that could never be achieved in real life between the two of them, never quite. I think that internalized relationship is sort of the primary reward of his abstinence. That he gets to enjoy this eternalized relationship with the sister who he so fundamentally wronged. He pays the price for that relationship by not killing and by shutting the door on his former life. And obviously, once he both kills again and welcomes Harrison back into his life, the nature of that internalized relationship is going to become a lot more chaotic and dicey and unpredictable and abusive. And you never know.
Yeah.
And it's basically the picture of a guy who's at odds with himself and is experiencing a great deal of inner turmoil and conflict over his return to his old ways.
I remember when we were talking through this, even on set, of how important it was in that first few scenes before Harrison arrives, that these two are comfortable in silence, which is sort of like the anti-Deb from before. It felt like the other Deb had to fill the silence at all times. That something had to be happening, questioning whatever, whether it was about herself or about Dexter. And we really wanted that first scene to just, those just beautiful moments of, I remember on set when Jennifer, when Dexter and Deb were Dexter's eating breakfast, eating the muesli, he's not, even that's kind of a punishment.
He's decidedly, at least relatively speaking, ascetic and
monastic,
withholding. When we sat at the table and there was that two shot, and I feel like you're going to talk about when Jennifer just sort of slid her arm down, and I sort of took that offer and moved my hand towards her without touching her. It felt like, yes, that's it. This is the sort of safe place in which he's able to exist psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, with the memory of her and what he's done. I mean, I think of him as having been in this protracted state of penance.
One of the things that's established very early on is that Dexter, like you've been saying, has been abstinent from killing. And we see him, the routine was very important, sort of setting up this idea of Dexter has placed his life in morning routines, in running after a deer, hunting, looks like he's hunting a deer, crossing days off calendars. I want to talk about that process, why that was so important for Dexter, and even just like the deer chasing is...
Mm-hmm. I think he's always been a creature of habit, and like he's found these new, somewhat ritualized behaviors that his lifestyle in the present context necessitates. I mean, he has to chop wood or he's going to be too cold. He has to feed his animals or they're going to die. He's placed himself in a situation where a certain ritual element of his lifestyle is necessary, and I think it keeps him occupied. It's all a sort of part of his therapeutic lifestyle. Tracking the white deer and following the deer, it's something that people do, actually. Will track an animal like that through the woods to the point where they have to stop running just because of the fact of their heart rate having accelerated to a degree where they can't run anymore. So I think in Dexter's case, he's never been a hunter, and this animal didn't do anything wrong, but he is a hunter of a sort, and he is addicted to pursuit. So again, this is a kind of methadone. It exhausts him physically. It satisfies some sort of deep drive to track and pursue it.
Lizard brain.
Yeah. And he puts himself close to the edge of doing the deed, and he never does it. He's sort of fortifying his resolve. And I think also this animal he says it to Matt, he was perfect. He didn't do anything wrong. There's a purity to this animal, a purity that I think Dexter longs to experience, longs to not even return to, but discover, and longs to literally touch. And he eventually, over the course of the episode, gets to a place with this deer. I imagine this has been a long-going process where he actually touches it. And when he touches it, the deer is destroyed. His access to that purity is destroyed, and he destroys the person who killed the deer. Also, it's the morning after he turned away his son. Yeah. I think that has a lot to do with why he snaps.
Yeah, that was like a argument in the writer's room in a lot of ways, was that would Dexter have killed Matt if Harrison had not been that thing that happened in town? If Harrison hadn't arrived, because for me, when we were like sort of putting this together, never has Dexter needed connection as bad as when he pushed his son away. Because, that scene... when Dexter has to push his son away. You want to talk about that night? That was pretty intense.
Yeah, it was absolutely heartbreaking. There was one take where I actually got upset, and Marcos was like, all right, get yourself together because you can't show him that, it was just so heartbreaking. I think when I read the script, it felt like it was the trickiest scene. The most difficult. And it's certainly one of many instances where the presence of Deb in Dexter's world and in the world of the show really goes such a long way to showing us what's going on internally. For her to look at him and list the people who've died and remind him of his commitment and to literally take a bullet out of her stomach and show it to him, I think helps us understand why he feels he just can't welcome Harrison back in. But I really love the timing of it, that happens. He has the nightmare. He wakes up the next morning, goes out, touches the deer, and the next thing he knows, he's killing Matt Caldwell. He's buried the killer, but he's also buried the father. He's buried a part of his humanity. And Harrison stirs that water up. You stir up the sort of deepest part of someone. It's not just their light. It's their darkness too. It's not just the this, it's also the that. And so his desire for connection and his desire to have a relationship with the only flesh and blood evidence that he's a real human being on earth, his son, he turns that away, but it's been activated. And of course, the next day, there's a residual activation of his dark passenger. I mean, obviously Matt pushes some buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think it's possible that Dexter may have been able to restrain himself in that moment had the night before not been one where his son showed up and he turned him away.
Accolades toward you. One of my favorite moments in that scene with Harrison, when Dexter sees the light turn on, somebody's in his place, and like the physicality just all came back, darting across the snow, picking up that hatchet, stepping inside, creeping forward. Oh my God, he's going to kill somebody. He's just been waiting for this excuse. It's an intruder.
Yeah, he's like, oh, thank goodness. This is just what I needed.
It's a righteous kill. And then this whole realization that, oh my God, it's Harrison in front of me. And after Dexter says, you got the wrong guy, I guess I must have that kind of face. He then had this moment where you realize you're standing there with the hatchet.
Yeah. Yeah. That was kind of a happy accident. I remember we were like, oh, it's weird that I'm holding this hatchet in my hand. I should just set it down conveniently at that table there with all the tools and sharpening equipment. But I held it, and it's just a moment that revealed itself and felt really perfect.
The kill.
Yeah.
Matt. I mean.
Oh, man. That guy is so good.
Steve Robertson, yeah.
Man, he was so good.
Matt on the table, wrapped in plastic. Want to just talk about that scene, like what it was like stepping back into that and the kill? And
because of the way we shot this, we didn't get to that until, I don't know. I feel like we were well past halfway through shooting when we did the Matt kill. And it was eerie how genuinely, after spending all the time I had up to that point playing the character again, how genuinely it felt like a sacred space, just like Dexter had fashioned a little chapel out of his tool shed. And this two-person worship service that he was performing. And there was a way of moving through the space that felt, it was perfect. It was perfect to have waited as long as I had as an actor to return to this character and to play a scene like this again, just as Dexter has waited as long as he has, to feel rusty, logistically, but also internally rusty. And yet to feel how eerily familiar it all was. The way Dexter moves through spaces like that. Yeah. The way he positions himself when he interrogates someone. Like it's all just like, the finger and the third eye. He loves to poke people in the third eye. It felt electric. This is who he is. This is what we're up to. It always feels with the character, it's like, now I am alone, now I can be myself.
It can be true and honest and talk openly about everything, Yeah,
and I can communicate without reservation with another person, ironically. Yeah. Those are always the people who I kill, but.
When we were sort of putting it together, we were wanting to make that sort of like, it opens up Dexter enough that he's like, I need this again in my life. I need not just the kill, but I need my son back in my life. And also...
Yeah, exactly. It's that same phenomenon, just like opening the door to that desire for connection and genuine sharing that he has with Matt, twistedly. Yeah, he does him in. He's like, I got to find another friend. Oh, my son.
That's right. Again, great kill scene. Everything about it felt complete, Yeah. In any other episode, that could have been the ending.
Yeah. I liked, the fact that he gets him to confess about driving the boat into the other boat. And you see Dexter kind of performing the scary kind of the five people. And then the real exposed nerve of the deer comes out.
Yeah.
You shot my deer. Like that's
my deer.
That's the thing that I feel like is really important for the trajectory of the season in terms of Dexter's relationship to killing as it exists now. It is in that moment, and I think remains much more personal.
That final scene, Dexter deciding to pick up his son, ignoring Deb, saying, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Dexter says, what I should have done a long time ago.
Yeah. He says, not listening to you.
Not listening to you. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And landing at the bus stop. It's a strange thing to hear Dexter say, please, to almost prostrate himself.
I don't think he's ever made himself that vulnerable before. before.
I agree. Want to talk about that? Like the two of you together in that scene where, we had the benefit of that was like one of the last scene for Jack.
That was Jack's last scene. It was very much obviously towards the end of the shoot. He and I had been through everything together.
Yeah.
We had individually and as a simulating this father and son relationship sort of covered all the ground. And it was such a gift that we got to shoot that last. But yeah, it was just such a beautifully simple scene. So much subtext, such loaded lines, such loaded silences. And it was very satisfying. And yeah, I think it's the most human we've seen him be.
Was there a moment filming that first episode that you want to talk about?
I don't know if anybody noticed, but I requested that there be a chair that I can spin in when I'm behind the desk at Fred's Fish and Game in the morning, as a callback to the pilot episode when Dexter's spinning around in his chair and his little blood spatter station.
Thank you so much for coming on to this, Michael.
Of course.
I know
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a good time. And joining me now is my mentor, my friend, my showrunner, Clyde Phillips. He's the Dexter New Blood executive producer and writer of this first episode. Clyde, man, we've known each other a long time.
Yeah. Why don't you tell everybody how we met?
Was it prison or was that somebody else?
That was somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to remember. I met through Robert Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
I was working on a different show, and you were looking for a writing assistant. And he was like, "Hey, you should meet Clyde." And so I met you, and you put up with me.
I think we had coffee at a restaurant, and by the end of the coffee, I said, "Okay, you got the job. I don't need to see anybody else." Yeah. And then now you're executive producer of New Blood.
Yeah, that was probably 20 years ago, I think. At this
it feels
point,
like it was. It feels like it was 20 years ago. Yeah.
And you were on Dexter the first 4 seasons.
That's right. I was.
How was that? Getting Dexter to go back to it. I think it's a lot of it comes from, if we can talk about it, because this will lead into where we're going with the new season. Was you come from a family of a rough family life growing up when you were young.
Yes.
Yeah. It just and Dexter, and you were, in your own way, I would say, born in blood, considering what your father did for a living.
Yeah, my father was a butcher, and he was also a gambler, and he was also in the Jewish mob in Boston, but at the lowest possible level. If you think of the movie Rocky, and Rocky's an enforcer, and he's beating up some guy named Vinny, the guy who would be beating up would have been my father. And I was born when my mother was 17, and my parents never really took to being parents. So I kind of had to raise myself, much as Dexter did. And, one of the great themes in my life is fathers and sons, which is the theme of the this whole season of New Blood. And it comes out in all my writing, in my books, in every script I write. There's always an issue, whether it's a good issue or a bad issue, about fathers and sons.
Yeah. That's sort of the connective tissue to the new series. Because again, when Dexter wrapped at the end of season 8, it kind of felt like Dexter was never going to happen again. And then every once in a while, Michael C. Hall would pop up in an interview, and the inevitable question to him was like, "Do you ever think that you'd ever want to do Dexter again? Would you return to this role?" He ended up a couple times going, "Yeah, I think I could see myself returning to this thing." And then, you want to talk about that? That's when you got the call,
Sure.
More or less, right?
Well, a couple of times earlier, it would come up on my feed that Michael had, 7 years ago said, "Yeah, maybe." And so I'd call him up and I say, "Do you mean it?" And he says, "I'm not so sure. I kind of had to say that," or I don't think I'm ready yet. Or there was a script that was developed that I didn't go for, and or I'm not available. I'm off in England doing Safe or whatever it is, or these movies that he's doing.
He kept busy between Broadway and television.
Broadway and his band. He's a musician and a singer. I'm going to cough.
Princess Goes to the Butterfly Museum. So if people want to listen to some Michael C. Hall singing, sounding very Bowie-esque at times, you should check out Princess Goes
I
to the
was just listening today. I was listening to Eating a Racer, and it's David Bowie.
Yeah.
So anyway, 2.5 years ago now, I was on Martha's Vineyard, where I am right now, and my phone rang, and it was Gary Levine, who's now president of the network, saying, I'm going to be in New York next week. Do you want to have lunch? And I said, Gary, you've got 2 daughters who live in New York. You don't want to have lunch with me. You want to have lunch with them. This is how close we are. So if this is business, let's just talk business. He says, okay, I'm busted. Michael Hall is ready to come back to Dexter, and we want you to do it. Will you do it? And I was I was a writer out pitching new ideas. I had just come off of doing Goliath, and was kind of licking my wounds after working on that show.
Sure.
And I sat with your former job. I sat with my writing assistant on Skype back before Zoom got too popular, and we bounced around ideas back and forth, and then I would write up a bunch of stuff, send it to him, and have him organize it. And then I finally had a pitch ready for Michael, and flew to New York and went to his apartment. It was a bit of a reunion. He and I had been in contact, but hadn't seen him for a long time. And went to his apartment, pitched him the idea. About 40 minutes later, he stood up, said, I love it. I'm in. Let's do this. Gave me a hug. On the way to the airport, because I was going back to Martha's Vineyard the same day, I called Gary Levine, who took the call right away and said, well, and I said, he loves it. He's in. Gary said, nothing about a pilot, nothing about anything. He said, go hire a writing staff. We're doing this.
Yep. It was great. It was a great, exciting room. And one of the things that we knew from the start that was going to be completely different about Dexter, outside the look and everything else, was that this isn't the Dexter that we knew before. He's not living in Miami. He's living in Iron Lake, and he has this new identity.
And we acknowledge the fact that 8 or 9 years have passed. We're not pretending this is Dexter season 9. We're just moving on.
Yeah. So let's talk about Iron Lake and why we chose there. This I mean, first of all, we wanted someplace cold. We wanted snow. We wanted small town. We wanted someplace that Dexter wouldn't feel like you live in a big city, and there's bad things happening all over the place, right? Iron Lake. Talk about Iron Lake, because you had a very specific vision for this place even before we started the room.
Yes, I wanted it to be a small, cold town that had nothing to do with Miami. And so that would compel us to shoot the show differently, so that in the first frame of the show, he's in the snow. And we wanted him to be living this abstinent, monastic life. Gave him a girlfriend who's in Native American, indigenous, Seneca, chief of police, which is always great for Dexter to be near a police department.
You can't resist it. It's like everything's different, but everything's kind of the same, Like he wants to shape his world even as cllose to what it used to be, while being completely different. That's the psychopath way, I guess, or something. Yeah. And
as so he's in this tiny town, population 2,760, I think the billboard says. Yeah. He's got this relationship with this woman. He's got his conscience, the person in his thoughts, the way Harry used to be, is now Deb, his sister, about whom he had once said in an earlier episode, if I were capable of love, and that's an interesting thought right there, because he's not capable of love, I would love my sister. And so she and Jennifer Carpenter is amazing, and they, of course, have let's say a complicated and loving relationship, Michael and Jennifer. And it was just terrific to have her back. She brought out the best. They brought out the best in each other. And we love Jennifer anyway.
Yes.
And we wanted the show to look and feel different in every regard. I mean, the opening scene is Dexter running through the snow to an Iggy Pop song.
Yeah.
Right, so we're saying
The
to the
Passenger.
audience, the passenger. That's right.
Yeah.
Dedicated to his Dark Passenger. And so right away, first frame, first soundbite, this show is different. But as Michael Hall himself has said several times, who we kidding? This is Dexter. People are going to die.
Yeah.
And the audience will be satisfied.
One of the things I wanted to clear up was a lot of times people have been talking about Deb as if she is like Harry and that Harry was sort of Dexter's dark passenger, right? It was this voice in his head that was saying, you're going to kill people, but you're going to kill people this way.
And for good, right.
And for good, right, yeah. Whereas Deb is not his dark passenger. Deb is something completely different. You want to talk about that?
Sure. Deb is, and we all have it in us, that corner of your brain that's always talking to you. Even when you're doing something perfectly right. If I'm going on a jog and I'm going by, on Martha's Vineyard here, if I'm going by Lobsterville Beach and couldn't be happier, couldn't be in a better position, and there's always that little voice, and it's more than just being Jewish. It's more. There's always that little voice that's tugging at you with reality, and whether it's okay, you're jogging, but what are you having for dinner tonight, or it's the most beautiful day it could ever be, but a week from now it's going to be raining. Whatever it is, that's what Deb is to Dexter. So every thought he has to think through, and much as we do with ourselves, discuss, is this a good idea or not? And this is Deb, not Harry. This is Jennifer Carpenter, not James Remar.
Yeah.
So she has a very strong point of view. And we're playing her the way we played her in the previous series, with her foul language and her very strong, aggressive point of view, with her command of Dexter's attention. And, one of the things we would talk about in the writing room back in LA is we always had to remind ourselves that Deb is his conscience. She's not a real person. She can't open a cabinet door. She can't hand him a pen. She can't drink a cup of tea. And we reminded ourselves that all through the season. And we made a couple of visual mistakes, which the audience can find as they watch the series.
Did we?
Or did we?
Yeah. Because Dexter sort of like, as one of the things to watch as the season goes forward is to watch that relationship between Dexter and Deb, because Dexter starts to exert his will over who that person is and that voice that he needs to hear. He
does that partly because of Harrison, because he wants Harrison back in his life. He exerts his will because the Dark Passenger, which the listeners have just seen pull Deb back underwater. Yeah. And underwater is your subconscious. And in Dexter's nightmare, that Dark Passenger is a bigger voice than his own conscience. And all of that is rooted upon his being born in blood, his having survived in a pool of his own dismembered mother's body, his blood, in a shipping container on the docks in Miami. And Harrison himself was born in blood. His mother, Rita, was killed in front of him, although he was a little child. It's what is called, or could be called, inherited trauma. And it lives within him and is waiting to be triggered. And sure enough, as our listeners watch the show, they'll see what happens.
Yeah, because that's the question that Dexter has, even in this first episode, is like, does he remember? Because even back in the day on the old show, Dexter had this fear. He would look at his kid and say, "Does he have the Dark Passenger?" And he would read into like normal actions that a little kid does. That sometimes little kids are mean. He would see that and be like, "Oh my God, he has a Dark Passenger. He's just like me." Because we all look at children through our our lens, our own
prism.
experience. Yeah.
Yes. It's not just does he remember, but does he carry within him, whether he remembers or not, does he carry within him what I, Dexter, carry within me and cannot ignore?
Yeah.
And as the
that'll
season
be the
plays
question
out,
of the
we'll learn
season.
that.
Yes.
Bringing in Dexter's son, Harrison, who has traveled the world to find his father, having thought that his father had died in the hurricane in the last episode of season 8, and then having learned that indeed from a letter that Dexter had sent Hannah, Yvonne Strahovski, that Dexter indeed survived, and as any teenager with a laptop can do, he found his father. From Argentina to Miami to Oregon to Iron Lake, New York.
Which is quite a journey that this kid did, without a lot of cash. And it just goes to show how strong-willed he is, and this focus that he has looking for his dad is intense. Yeah.
Yeah, how obsessed he is, how much he needed a father. He was alone in the world. His mother had been murdered. His stepmother had died of cancer. He was shipped off to the foster care system in the U.S., and he was a teenager. Nobody wants a teenager, and so he was maltreated, and said basically, "Fuck it, I'm going to go find my father." And he did, and Harrison's played by this great young actor named Jack Alcott, who Showtime fans would recognize from Good Lord Bird.
Yeah.
Yes. He played one of John Brown. He played John Brown's youngest son and was just great in that.
And he's incredible in this. Like that scene when Dexter, after Dexter's had a very rough day, he's convinced somebody's following him. And it's late at night. He comes back home. He's all agitated because he was talking to Matt. Harrison breaks in the cabin. He's looking for proof, trying to see if this really is his dad. And that scene between Dexter and Harrison with Deb in the middle.
With Deb the imagination in the middle. Yes.
Yes.
Really, really powerful. And just on the production side of it, we shot that scene in February on a frozen lake, in a cabin that's on a frozen lake. And the next scene... Cabin we built, that's right, and built a replica of on the sound stages in Devens, Massachusetts. And the very next scene, Dexter goes to get, or a couple scenes later rather, Dexter goes to get Harrison at the bus station, and we shot that on July 28th at night in 80. It was a heat wave, 84 degrees. All the actors have to wear their heavy coats and their boots and their gloves and their scarves. And we're all standing around in shorts and T-shirts because it was so hot. And by then, Michael Hall and Jack Alcott had gotten to know each other so well that the scene was really emotional. Other actors who had already wrapped out of the show came by to watch. And they sat down, they did the scene. We did 3 angles. Our editor, Perry Frank, directed by Marco Siega, edited by Perry Frank, they cut it together, and we never touched it. We didn't change a frame of it. It was just perfect because the actors knew exactly what to do. And by then, we were at the end of the shoot. We finished shooting 2 days later. Everybody was locked in, and it's just a beautiful, heartbreaking scene. Yeah,
it was fun to watch those two, Michael and Jack, get to know each other as they went along. Because Jack, I remember there's a certain point where Michael saw some dailies of Jack. That he and Jack was doing like a scene without Dexter even in it. I can't remember which one it was, but Michael watched it and then he went, "That son of a gun, he's copying, he's mimicking me, my movements, the things I do in my leg, the way I scratch my left leg. That's not in the script or anything. The way he eats. The way they eat. Yeah. He's casting Harrison was a coup. This season, which we shot the first 50 days, we shot all outdoors. Not a lot of no TV shows really do that. I don't think they have to because we had to chase the winter the way that we did. So we had all the scripts written too. Right. Yeah, we had all 10 episodes. So we were shooting on day one, we shot from 3 different episodes. On day 2, we shot from, 4 different episodes. Sometimes it would be episode 6 and episode 1 and episode 10.
And 2 directors working on the same day, and also having to explain to the actors, or they would ask us, or ask the directors, okay, I'm shooting this from episode 4, and this from episode 10, and this from episode 1. And when we get to the one in episode 9, what was the scene just before? Because what am I feeling? Did I just have an argument with my girlfriend? Did I just get in a fight with my son? Did I just kill somebody? What was the scene right before this, which we're going to shoot in May, and this is February 10th. And so we would have to do that because we had all 10 scripts written. We basically shot a 10-hour movie. And so we shot based on locations. We were location dependent. Plus, as you say, we shot the first 50 days exterior or away from the studio because we had to build the sets at the studio. And it wasn't until we could go there for cover and catch up to ourselves that it actually kind of started to feel normal. We had offices, we had bathrooms.
So nice to have a bathroom and not a porta-john. But all this to say that Michael C. Hall is playing Dexter. Normally would have a kill as a release, right?
Yes.
And it would build up, and then finally, in the course of 10 days, Dexter would kill somebody, and that's a lot for Michael to sort of take on this dark passenger kill room scenes, which he loved to do, but it's a lot. But he didn't get to do that until I think 12 weeks in.
It was something like that. He and I talked about it, and it may have even been on your show. I think I asked him because in the early days of the show, of the previous Dexter, it would be building toward taking out the big bad. Jimmy Smits, John Lithgow, Lila Murray, Christian Carmago. And so Michael Hall would build and build and build in his own intensity as any great actor would. And by the time the 10th or 12th episode came around, Michael was off to himself, living in his head. But because in our show, because we shot all over the place and a kill would happen 4 weeks in and another kill would happen 11 weeks in, that tension, that anxiety, that intensity wasn't building in Michael in the same way. It was a very different experience for him. Hence, it was a very different and more pleasurable experience for us.
Yeah, but he was ready to kill Matt when Steve Robertson. When that happened, when we finally built that kill room, it was. I don't know if you remember that day, but watching Michael walk into the plastic room and just inhabit Dexter, the dark passenger. To pull on a Henley and a leather
apron and in the elbow length gloves, and to cut Steve's face with that piece of glass and make the blood slide. I mean, we all of us, Michael especially, but all of us. It was a very special day for all of us. We slipped back into doing something that we knew was right. I'm not talking about killing people is right. I'm talking about dramatically, thematically, artistically, with a small a. We were home again.
Yeah. I remember Jen Garbino, our prop master. That was her most nervous day of all, because she knows that fans love their kill rooms. And if anything isn't right, they will come after her. She's tough. But that day she was really nervous, and you could feel the energy bouncing off of her. I was like, are you okay? What's going on? She's like, I just really want to get this right. I want to get everything the way, and she did, by the way. It was. Yeah,
she did. She was terrific.
Yeah. Let's talk about Matt. How fun was that guy?
Steve, first of all, he's an amazing actor. And the minute you saw him enter Fred's Fish and Game and be this obnoxious asshole, this Wall Street broker who's from the town, whose father was the richest guy in town, and right away. And what's interesting is he's so tempting. You want to kill him on the spot, but Dexter Dexter is abstinent, so he won't buy into it. And remember when he goes to the police station to visit Angela, played by Julia Jones, he's talking about everything except Matt. This is after Matt's gun FBI clearance wouldn't pass. And of course, because it's a small town, the police station already knew about it, and they want to talk about it. And but he doesn't want to talk about it. How about that stop
sign? How about we put a stop sign up near the package store?
Yeah, right. Or boy, those pecan pies that you just recovered smell terrific. I don't want to know about anything about Matt because I'm not going there. And
he doesn't want to be tempted by this guy, even though back in the old days, if he'd have met this guy and then heard that he was may have been responsible for the deaths of 5 different people and got away with it, that's what Dexter that's what he loved.
Well, so what he was doing was he was suppressing his instinct and his dark passenger and those antenna that would go doing.
Yeah.
This is something to pay attention to. And he was not going to let that happen until Matt made it happen.
Even in the room, we had like long discussions about if Harrison had not arrived in town and sort of upset Dexter's equilibrium, because Dexter, in a lot of ways, this white deer that's out there is about connection. It's about connection and addiction. We can talk about the deer in a second. But if Harrison hadn't been there and Matt had shot that deer in front of him, I think Dexter could have resisted the urge to kill this guy. But that connection with that deer hurt his soul so much, and his anger. Again, this is like one of the most human kills that Dexter's had. There's been a few of them.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I'm not sure I agree.
Yeah, I love it.
I think that Dexter, knowing what he knew about Matt, what he finally learns about Matt from Bill, first from Esther, then from Bill in the scene where Dexter's delivering the gun, that Matt indeed was driving that boat, indeed rammed into the other boat after the other boat had yielded and sort of shown its neck and still went at it. He knew that Matt deserved to die. And I think Dexter's dark passenger, regardless of Harrison and regardless of the white buck, was finally challenged to the point where he yielded to that. Again, that's Deb getting pulled under the water by the dark passenger in that beautiful scene. Chasing the white buck is something that we open with it, and we believe Dexter's been doing this for years. And it is, it's physical exertion, it's mental exertion, it is a craving to have a connection with another living thing that he doesn't have to explain himself away to or pretend that he's someone else. When he's with Angela, or anybody else in this small town, if they knew who he really was, it would all blow up in his face.
Yeah.
This is a majestic creature with a long lineage and a rare creature, an albino deer, with whom he had, I'm doing finger quotes, a relationship. Yep. Because he was not a non-judgmental relationship. He would chase this deer, and finally he got close enough to the deer where they almost touched foreheads. And in fact, when we shot it, we had them touching foreheads, and Showtime wanted to pull it back a little bit, which broke my heart some, because I really loved that moment. But it was interesting because it made you feel like a little bit like, is this real or is this not? Is this really happening? Yes. It like ended this strange, this beautiful magical realism in a way, because that deer represented so much complex ideas inside of Dexter that, even it's in some ways when he wraps his finger around the trigger, icy comma of the trigger. What was the word you put in the script? Steel comma.
The steel comma of the trigger, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a little bit like because Dexter's about addiction. It's like when an alcoholic, opens up a bottle of bourbon, sniffs it,
It smells it.
smells it, puts the cap back on it, puts it back on the shelf, and it's like I've defeated this thing.
Yes,
the dark passenger
yes.
can't control me. Because I'm not sure that killing that deer would feed the dark passenger either. That was the other thing we talked a lot about in the room. Was that
Right, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he would then just have to move on to the next, and the dark passenger would still be talking to him, and he'd have to find something else. That's one of the things of the calendar that we have in there, which has its own symbolism, and we made a point of showing that there were several calendars, several years of abstinence, and that red Sharpie marker crossing off each day of abstinence for years and years and years. And who are we kidding? That red Sharpie marker looks like a cheek slice from his kill table. Yeah, and that's no accident.
It's no accident. No. That was very, very purposeful. And then, the thing about killing somebody when you haven't done it for 10 years, as we all know, is maybe you're a little rusty. maybe you don't cover your tracks as well as you used to.
Well, he actually says, he actually says to Matt when he's on the table, I'm a little out of practice. I'm sorry for the mess. I'm a little out of practice. And then, as always happens with all serial killers I know about, they leave something behind. Even the Zodiac killer. The Zodiac killer just got decoded. I'm sure you know. He left he messed up. He was out of practice and he made a mistake, and spends the next couple of episodes trying to cover up for that.
Yep. It's always blood. Always leads back to blood. Yeah.
Blood is the body's truth.
Yep. The little hint for upcoming episode. Everybody listen for that. That'll be fun. You want to give fans just a general idea of what they can expect this season without spoiling anything? Do you think that's possible, Clyde?
Yeah, we could try. Well, we'll stick with the theme of fathers and sons.
Yes.
The Matt, whom Dexter kills in the first episode, has a very strong. It's no secret. Has a very strong father, and
played by Clancy Brown.
Clancy Brown. We're so lucky to get him. The greatest guy in the world. And again, it's interesting with Dexter. We always choose these big guys. At least in my tenure, John Lithgow and Jimmy Smits and Kate and Clancy Brown. It's like Dexter against Easter Island, These, and of course it's Dexter, so he's going to prevail. Harrison, who is disaffected from Dexter, and attracted to Kurt's fatherly instincts, kind of walks the razor a little bit between Dexter, his own father, and the father of one of Dexter's victims, which of course Harrison doesn't know about. Harrison doesn't know that. Go ahead.
It's like we tell the story about a father who lost his son and a father who's gained his son and doesn't want to lose him, And
that's right. That's really well put. And Harrison doesn't quite know what to do. First of all, Harrison has been abandoned. He's angry. He's hurt. He's lonely. And yet he's resourceful and confident. I think Deb says to him in episode 2, I think it is, something to the extent of, not everybody is as ill-equipped to meet new people as you dumb fuck. Because Harrison goes off with the other high school kids and makes friends right away, and is comfortable within himself, and is comfortable trying to discover if pain, his own internal pain, is going to defeat him, or if he can embrace it, and become a better young man.
Yeah, we consciously, when we were crafting Harrison in the room, we didn't want that sort of mean, let's face it, with the flashbacks to young Dexter in like the first 3 seasons, he's an uncomfortable kid. you know, he's always kind of sweaty, kind of awkward, enters basketball courts with knives.
Knives, is about to kill somebody when he was a teenager.
Yeah, and we wanted someone that looks completely different than that, you know, somebody that, because, you know, kids come in all shapes, sizes, and forms. Yet he has a deep, in his marrow, pain and anger. Yes.
And so a lot of what he's doing is a lot of what his father does. He's putting on a front.
He's wearing the mask.
He's wearing the mask.
Maybe.
And whether or not he has the Dark Passenger, we'll discover as the season goes on.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thank you, Clyde, for coming on board.
It's a pleasure, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael C. Hall, for coming on board. Don't forget to listen every Tuesday and subscribe to the Dexter New Blood Wrap-Up wherever you get your podcasts. And watch Dexter New Blood Sundays only on Showtime. This official podcast of the Showtime original series Dexter New Blood is produced by Showtime in conjunction with Malka Media.